the funds have dried out completely. The ones that were lucky that had investment before, so now they had to preserve it significantly. So, for instance, a company that was developing a couple of products will have to focus only on a single one, things like that.
This episode was brought to you by Mind 360, where psychological evaluations become effortless. As an exclusive offer, all IRH subscribers will receive their first evaluation free. Visit www.mind360.us/IRH to sign up and reserve your spot on our list. Elevate care, reduce wait times. Mind 360 is psychology made simple. This episode was brought to you by Family Inceptions. Join the Family Inceptions surrogate referral list at familyinceptions.com/IRH. Connect with intended parents by using our exclusive surrogacy roadmap and elevate your practice today. Today's advertisers helped make the production and delivery of this episode possible for free to you. But the themes expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Inside Reproductive Health, nor of the advertisers. The advertisers do not have editorial control over the content of this episode, and the guest's appearance is not an endorsement of the advertisers.
You have an idea for a startup that will completely revolutionize the fertility space. You need money. You might want some guidance. You might want some collaboration. How much of your company would you give up in order to get those? My guest talks about the average percentage of equity that his firm takes in startups, and he introduces us to a different kind of venture capital in the fertility space. Dr. Santiago Munné's Homu Ventures is an incubator. They currently have 15 companies in their portfolio, all in the reproductive health space. They're developing companies at different parts of the fertility treatment chain. Dr. Munné talks about the ecosystem that they all fit into. You might know Santi as the founder of Recombine, the founder of Reprogenetics. I believe he sold both of those companies to Cooper, where he was the chief scientific officer for a couple years. He's co-founded a number of other companies and operated some of them. He was on the other side as the investee. Now he's the investor. We go through what is their target return on investment multiple? What's their target return on investment timeframe? What do these companies have to have and have to prove before Dr. Munné's team will invest in them? Why don't they invest in AI companies? Is Santi right about AI solutions being more tools than complete business solutions? Or is he missing the bigger picture? We go into more detail about the automation that needs to happen in the IVF lab, beyond storage and witnessing, to automating ICSI, automating egg freezing, and others. I asked Dr. Munné, what's the appropriate level of proof of concept for companies in these stages? They haven't sold anything yet. How do you know anybody wants it? And Santi shares what it's like out there in the current venture capital market. I don't know Dr. Munné too well beyond this interview, but one thing that I think you're going to like about him is that he's not a pitch man. He gives very straightforward answers, and as far as I can tell, doesn't sugarcoat anything. Enjoy the episode. Dr. Munné, Santi, welcome to the Inside Reproductive Health podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I've gotten to know you a bit from your involvement in different companies. I've gotten to know a little bit of some of the companies that you've invested in, and I'm not here to necessarily talk too much about those individual companies, but I am interested in how you invest in them and how you've chosen to invest in them. I want to get to all that, but your background is first a scientific training. Your PhD is in genetics. I believe that you also have a degree in biology. And so when did business come into play? When did investing come into play? Did that come in very early on in your career as you were studying genetics and biology, or did it come much later?
No, actually, so I developed the first genetic test to screen embryos for chromosome abnormalities, and accidentally it became a company, and then it was one after another. We created other companies, or I got involved in investing and so on. And at the end, it was I had a little bit too many at the same time. So we decided to create an incubator, and with some help, then now we have this incubator, Homu Health Ventures, in which we have about 15 companies, all in reproductive medicine.
So you said you had a couple too many. How many companies did you have before you formed the incubator?
Well, one thing is to be the CEO. I've been only the CEO of Revolutionize, and then I helped found several other companies, and yes, between the day to day of these companies, so it was getting too complicated, so we decided to that we needed more help. Basically, after I sold a couple of them to Cooper Surgical, um, I founded three more companies, and also we had other ideas of potential companies, but it became too complicated to manage all those. So with a friend, Jose Cajadas, we decided to get some more help and create an incubator where we put all these ideas and emerging companies, mostly on pre-seed stage, and this is how this incubator started up.
In the beginning, were you involved as an operator in all of those businesses? You said you sold two or three companies, and were you either CEO or chief scientific officer or chief operating officer of all of them? Were you deeply involved in the operations of all of those companies?
Yeah, I've been involved in Reprogenetics, where I was the CEO. Then I've been CEO and Chief Scientific Officer of a couple more, including Overture, the last one.
So there's a difference between being an operator and the investor, and I guess we'll get to that. But when you had those companies, or Reprogenetic, or any of the other companies, did you have venture capital funding for any of those companies?
Um, yes, yes. Well, not Reprogenetics, but we had that was all organic, but all the others have been funded by private equity. Sorry, by VC.
So you did have experience working with venture capitalists, with investors before you became one yourself. Was there a process that you went through while you were still at the operator level of those two or three companies that was like a transition to an investor? So you were like a part investor in your own companies. Did you become an accredited investor during that time? Talk to us about what that process was like.
No, that happened afterwards. So first, we got funding in several of these companies, Recombine, Phosphorus, Overture, and after that, we funded this incubator and started investing in it.
What year did the incubator start?
That was only 3 years ago.
So you've had success in building the businesses. You get some capital to do it. You have some uh, experience with venture capital. But tell us more about how the incubator came to be.
Well, basically, we think that when you are starting a company, the investors or the market will push you to develop a single product, and you are lucky you will develop this product and you may be successful, and if you're successful you may create other products after that, but usually you have to focus on a single product. And in order to change reproductive medicine as we know it, to make it more affordable and more efficient, you really need to change a lot of things. You need a whole ecosystem of companies that are synergetic between themselves. And this is really very difficult to do from a single company. I don't think any of the ones that are there or that we have invested, they can do it by themselves. The idea or the leitmotif of the incubator is to create this ecosystem of companies that are synergetic, and together they may be able to change and improve the field of reproductive medicine.
How do they work together in that ecosystem?
Well, so for instance, we have a company that's called Sama that it's developing basically monitors patients remotely. But then we have another one, Gene Embryonics, that develops a genetic test to screen embryos for de novo mutations, doing whole genome sequencing. So we put them together, and Gene Embryonics will develop a test that will be a companion test for hormonal stimulation. So that will help some better monitor patients, for instance. Or, for instance, we have another company, Butterfly, that is developing a system to retrieve eggs from by flushing the uterine cavity without the need of surgery or an anesthesia. And on the other side, there is Overture that has developed egg freezing in a very small device. So if you combine them, you could put them, both systems, in an OBGYN office. You wouldn't need an OR. And the idea is that then fertility preservation would be much easier, would be done in OBGYN office instead of having to go to an IVF center. So we're looking for companies that combine can change the field.
So are you keeping all of this in a sort of hub? Like, is there a hub for this ecosystem, or you're connecting these companies together, and are they just sort of connecting with each other so they can learn from each other a little bit? Or are you viewing this like a map, and here's where each of these different players plug in, and you have some sort of centralized way that they are all working in towards the same manifestation of the ecosystem?
Yeah, no, it's more like a map. Yeah, and we're trying to find, actively find sometimes, companies that fit some gaps in this ecosystem. But yeah, it's not a physical place.
Did you start with that map 3 or 4 years ago when you started
Yes.
the incubator? How differently or similarly does that map look today than it did 4 years ago?
Uh, it looks much better. I mean, I think at the beginning we thought it would be easier, and it's not going to be so easy. It takes much more funding, and yeah, there are a lot of things that you don't predict. But yeah, I think it looks better, but also more complicated. So I think we're getting closer, but we were not expecting to be so difficult.
What specifically did you think would be easier?
Well, we thought that things will happen much sooner, and then you get the dynamics of small companies, investors, funding, and so on, that derails a bunch of these products and companies.
When you say things would happen much sooner, do you mean fundraising would happen certain fundraising rounds,
Yeah,
or
also, yeah, also, I mean, we had very difficult 2 years for funding, so all the companies basically had to be much more conservative with the money that they raised previously, because it's very difficult right now still to raise funds.
how do you, as an incubator, work with other venture firms?
Basically, we try to co-invest sometimes, but mostly we are trying to yeah to sell the companies, or to basically advertise that these companies are doing this work, and that they need funding, more than co-invest. Yeah, usually we find the companies that we like, and then we try to find people that would co-invest, but not at the contrary.
So I'm probably a little bit ignorant as to how incubators work. I think I assumed that incubators will do some angel or some maybe seed round investing in all of the companies in the incubator. Is that the case?
Yes.
Have you invested at the angel level at each of them? Have you invested beyond the angel round for any of them in the Series A or?
Yes. So we did angel, pre-seed, and seed, and some are at the level of A. But yeah, we try to invest at the very early stage, and get about 10% of the company.
And so what in your estimate, why has it been difficult in your view to this fundraising environment in the last 2 years? Because the last year, well, we've seen interest rates skyrocket relative to what they had been. The capital that was just kind of floating around for 2 years has started uh, to to not flow like that. But uh, the prior to that, there was a lot of money going around. And so, in your view, what has been the challenge in fundraising for these companies?
Yes, no, that the funds have dried out completely, and the ones that were lucky that had investment before, so now they had to preserve it significantly. So, for instance, a company that was developing a couple of products will have to focus only on a single one, things like that.
That was going to be my question in terms of what does this do to their commercialization? Does it delay it, or does it make it happen sooner because they have to start selling?
Well, in a way, it makes you to be more agile. That so far, most of them have survived that process and are still at it. But yes, it has delayed um, going to market and and make things more difficult.
Are all of these companies in similar stages? Did they all start with you 4 years ago, or have some started 4 years ago, some started 2 years ago, and maybe in the last couple months you have somebody else? Tell us about that.
Yeah, most of them are at similar stages. So either they are all past proof of concept, so that they are working on products that they will reach the market in maybe a year, 2 years. Um, a couple are have products already in the market, just starting selling them very early.
So tell us, how do you decide which companies are worth taking on?
Yeah, so we want companies that have IP or that they are developing IP. So not very interested in marketplaces and things like that. Um, and that will, I mean, that they could return, let's say, 20x ROI in 6 to 8 years, and in which we can really contribute ourselves also. So we like to be very involved in these companies. So we have to understand it, and also we want to contribute. That's the fun part, that to be involved with them, not just silly money.
Are you tired of the complex, time consuming psychological evaluation process that takes around 6 weeks? Mind 360 is here to change that. We specialize in making psychological assessments for third party infertility cycles seamless and stress free. With our platform, you'll get assessments done by PhD professionals, streamlined through telehealth, directly into your clinic's portal, ensuring compliance with ASRM and FDA guidelines without the hassle. But here's the best part. Sign up today and your clinic will receive the first patient evaluation absolutely free. Experience firsthand how Mind 360 can transform the way your clinic's third-party program operates, improving both efficiency and patient care. Don't let cumbersome evaluations slow you down. Visit mind360.us/IRH and let Mind360 take the burden off your shoulders, making psychological evaluations a breeze.
How do you determine what degree of intellectual property is worth it, or do they even have the intellectual property? Like, you might look at something and you might say that's not IP. How do you determine that?
Well, it's they should develop patents. They should file for patents, and for instance, it's very difficult to get patents in AI. So it's one of the areas in which we haven't done anything, because I think you just need big data. If you're a network, have the data organized, and any network can create their own AI to select embryos, do an algorithm for hormone stimulation, and so on. That's why we haven't touched that. Also, it's very difficult to protect it algorithms.
I want to talk about that. I want to get into to what that actually might entail. Any network being able to create their own AI algorithms, but first on the patent side for IPs, are you looking at folks that already have technology under patent? Is patent pending sufficient to you? How do you look at that?
No, patent pending will be sufficient, provided that we understand the patent and we think that it may go somewhere.
As you're building out this map, tell us more, just at a high level. What do you think is missing most in the fertility space? You've been in the field for a long time now. You've gotten to see both incumbent fertility companies and fertility clinic networks. You've gotten to work in it. You've gotten to build and sell a few companies, and now you have these new young companies, and you're mapping together the needs that are missing. What are those needs in your view? How would you categorize the biggest two or three needs that are currently missing or are big challenges in the fertility space?
Oh, that definitely. I mean, there's a big focus on automation. So the whole IVF lab should be automated. Not because we want to get rid of the people that were there. There is a lot of steps that are manual, just pipetting, in which the only thing that you could do is make a mistake. It's not very rewarding to do it. Um, Initially, embryologists were scientists, now are becoming technicians. So if the routine part that's where you can make mistakes can be automated, that will be great, because there's great variability between clinics and between just people working on the same clinic. For instance, I have a paper on genetic abnormalities in embryos, in egg donors. In theory, all egg donors are young, so you should have a similar rate of chromosome abnormalities in those embryos. But we had from 20 to 60% aneuploidy rates depending on the clinic. So obviously, this means that there is too much variability. The problem with variability is that then when you launch a product, let's say when we launch PGT, for instance, some people would say, well, it doesn't work because they don't do it right. And it's very difficult then that a new technique catches on because everybody does it differently, and the results are not consistent. If you have, let's say, if you launch it in a platform, then it's much easier to see if it works or it doesn't work. And if it works, then you can innovate faster and faster. So these platforms, it's what we really need to innovate much faster. So yes, one thing is automation. Um, I would say that that's the key. Then there haven't been any new developments in drugs for a long time, or how those drugs are delivered. We are not investing in that because it's a lot of money. So for us at our level, we cannot invest in drugs. But it's an area where there is not much innovation lately, and how the drugs are delivered also.
Why do you suspect that is?
The patents from those drugs expired, and it seems that those companies are not interested in developing new ones. I really don't know, but yeah, there is not much innovation there, or people developing new drugs and deliveries of those drugs.
So you're not aware of too much innovation happening on the drug side for
No.
pharmaceuticals. So then we'll go back to where you are more familiar with the innovation happening that you're trying to do, the automation in the IVF lab. I want to describe to you how I understand the IVF lab, and you tell me what is being automated or can be automated. And this is what I understand as someone who does not have any clinical training or any scientific background. So that the egg is retrieved and goes into the lab through a window, typically in the OR. The embryologists then put the oocytes in media, and then I think I don't know if there's something else that happens to it. They grow it to day 5 blastocyst. They need to label everything up, where all of the specimens come from, the sperm, the oocytes, the donor trails. I don't know exactly where it's stored during that time. And then once embryos are created, the most viable embryo is transferred back to the uterus, and the other embryos are stored. And those embryos can be stored on site, or they can be stored off site. Some may need to go to deposition and be discarded, and there needs to be labeling and monitoring across that chain. But that's the extent to which I understand. Our audience understands a lot more deeply than I do. But tell me, in that chain, what isn't automated now? What needs to be automated?
So right now, there is very little that is automated. We have probably 2 or 3 products. So, for instance, you have the embryoscopes, or incubators with some time lapse that can capture images continuously, so you don't have to take the embryos from the incubator to check them. That's been a great advance, and this really has, as a platform, that became probably the first platform that we had. And thanks to that, now we can develop AI to select embryos. So that was a great invention, and it's one of the few things that it's basically automated. Before, we had to take the embryos out of the incubator every day to check them. That created changes in temperature and pH and so on. So it was a little bit detrimental for the embryos. And then we have, there are some machines that can track where the eggs are frozen. So that's like tomorrow, for instance. And then you have 8 witnesses. So before, you had to have 2 people watching each other, so you don't lose track of all these dishes, because mistakes were done and are done very commonly. So you needed a witness system. Now with these tags, you can. It's called a witness system, and by tagging all the dishes, you know where they are, and it doesn't let you make mistakes when you are handling a bunch of dishes. But these are essentially small things. You still have to, for instance, do ICSI, so inject the sperm inside the egg. There's a company, Overture, working on that. It's not commercialized. Freeze eggs, also that's not commercialized yet, but are people developing that, Overture. You could, for instance, when you do the transfer of the embryos, about 10 to 20%, it's thought that those transfers don't go well, because of basically you are doing the transfer blindly with an ultrasound, but it's kind of blindly. So now there is this company, Butterfly, that has put a lens on the catheter at the end, so we'll be able to see exactly where you put the embryos when you do the transfer. And so once you start automating each one of these steps, then you can think about putting all these steps together in a machine that does the whole thing together. But first, or at least how some of these companies are working, is just having technological blocks that solve one problem first, and then once you solve it, then you put them together.
That brings me back to your original thesis of having the incubator, because there's all of these different problems, and it's hard for one company to solve for all of the individual challenges. And this way, you have an ecosystem of people that can come together and fill in that map. What about someone that would say, well, why not create just one massive company and have this one massive company do all of that from start to finish? What's the argument against that?
No, there is no argument against that. It's that, well, you need a lot of financing, and then your vision may not be the right one, right? You may have a way to do it, but it may not work. So if you have, let's say, a competition of ideas on how it should work, I think it will be more successful at the end.
So either way, you need a lot of financing. So that seems
Yeah,
like
you'll need a lot of financing.
either whether it's a number of different companies solving different problems, or one aspiring megalith company trying to solve it all themselves. It seems like either way, you need a lot of financing, and you could have errors in the vision one way or the other. But are you saying with having multiple smaller company, or not necessarily even smaller, but starting smaller in scope, I suppose, or starting more focused in scope, are you saying that it allows for more iteration because
Well, I
you'll
think it would allow for, yeah, if, let's say, this big company tries to solve everything, but it fails in one point and doesn't know how to solve it, or financing finishes, or then the whole project goes to. Meanwhile, if you have a bunch of companies competing in each one of the technological models, some of them will succeed, and then at the end you'll have the whole pipeline.
IVF specialists and REI clinics, it's time to share the step-by-step guidance of surrogacy experts with your independent IPs. Our roadmap is where intended parents start their journey. Sign up to be on our surrogacy referral list. Joining means you're part of their first step towards parenthood. This isn't just about being listed. It's about being a preferred choice for those who seek the best infertility care. We provide a comprehensive resource for everyone involved in the process. Join the Family Inceptions referral network by visiting familyinceptions.com/IRH. Be more than a clinic. Be a cornerstone in the path to family.
So you talked about these areas for automation that you see as important, and part of the reason that it fits with your investment thesis is because they've got patent pending. That sounds like that's one of the reasons why you haven't invested in AI companies, because there's not a patent to be filed for there. And so I want to explore that a little bit more, because you said their networks could be able to create their own AI, create their own algorithms, and I'm wondering how accurate or how easy that is. People said the same thing about software for years, right? Scientific people said like, "Oh,
Yeah.
we can create our own workflow software. We can create our own CRM." And it's like in the vast majority of cases, it's a lot better to use somebody else's software. And so, tell us about how this analogy either applies or doesn't apply with AI.
Well, right now AI has been used mostly for embryo selection, and really it seems that there is like a plateau around 70% area under the curve about distinguishing which embryos will implant. And there are like probably 10 companies or more working on the same. Basically, all of them had access to some network of centers where they got the data. So it seems that there is very little differentiation between one product and another, um, and to us, it as I said, I think that if you have enough data and a team of 5 or 6 people experts in that, you can do the same.
So, who do you think will win that race?
Uh, well, I think that it's what they had to develop. It's been developed. As I said, we wouldn't invest on it right now because there is not enough differentiation, and I think it's very easy to enter that market provided that you have enough data.
So it sounds like then they're missing something, because in one of the things that's missing sounds like patents and a particular differentiator, but it's almost, or it seems like it would be almost certain to me, maybe I'm wrong, that many of the technologies that you're incubating today will be powered by AI in some ways in the future. So what would certain AI companies need to evolve to the next? Would they need to incorporate with some kind of hardware, or just something that requires a patent? As you all start to incorporate AI more, what do they need to do on their side?
No, I see AI as a tool. So it could be mathematics, physics, AI. For instance, in Overture, so we develop an automated ICSI device that uses AI. We have a couple of developers, and that was enough to for the device to find where the sperm was, where the needles were, and inject it perfectly. But it was a tool. It was not. It was just part of the toolbox that we had to develop the device. So I see it mostly as a tool, more than a company or an end in itself.
Well, you talk about the involvement from the incubator in the companies that you're selecting. What type of involvement do you have with them?
Well, for instance, I'm so in addition of other duties, but basically I'm in the board of three of the 15 companies that we have in the incubator, and I'm in contact every week with them, meetings, introduction to investors, to clients, networks. Going through the business plan, the whole thing.
And so, what type of advice are you giving them? Let's say when it comes to forming the business plan, that this is a company that's in your incubator. They have something that you've liked. How are you typically coaching them?
Usually, we're looking for either products that fit the story, and sometimes they come from scientists that they have a very good idea. They know how to develop the idea, but they are not very good executors. And in those cases, what we've done in a couple of instances was to put a CEO that was more executive than a scientist. The combination of being a scientist and a good CEO, it's quite difficult. There are not too many examples. Um, so usually either we find these people, or if not, then sometimes we had help. We put CEOs, sometimes for a limited time, to help them.
How often is it the case that people are seeking you out because they want that help with different business leadership? I'm of the bias that most founders want to remain in control of their company, but I guess it could be the case that there are some scientists out there that say, listen, I want to be a co founder, I want to be the chief scientific officer, and I want to have a huge role in this, but I know that I'm not going to be the one to build out the company. How often is it the case where people are pursuing new leadership and looking for your help with that versus you really have to encourage them to do it?
I would say all the starts are wanting to be the CEO and manage the company, but then they realize that I'm a scientist. What I enjoy is to developing products, discovering new things, and the day to day it's a killer, and I don't like that. So some of them rather become a chief scientific officer and not have to deal with all the other things.
And so you talked about patents as one of the things that you're looking for in companies, and if they don't have that differentiator, that's one of the things that maybe isn't a good fit for your incubator. But what else is a no go for you if you're looking at a new company that it's like if it's like this, then probably not something we want to get involved with.
One, it has to by itself. It needs to be big enough, the idea that it could sustain a company. So we don't want little things that we don't think by itself would be a viable company or a large company. Um, Individuals are very important. So we need to have a good, and I guess it's more a feeling that that person has the vision, the right vision, to take it to the next level. and yes, it needs also to fit the vision, as I said, that we have.
How about the appropriate level of proof of concept for your incubator? One of the things that I feel like I wouldn't necessarily be a great VC at is I think I typically want to see more proof of concept from just about anything. I want to see sales. And in many cases, that you're dealing with technologies that aren't ready for that. That's why they're pursuing VC. That's why they're pursuing being in an incubator. But my bias is to want to see something that says the only way that I know that the market wants this is because the market has paid for it. People in the marketplace have parted ways with their dollars, and that's what proves concept. My threshold is probably too high for venture capital, but what is the appropriate level of proof of concept for companies in this stage, in your view?
Right now, I think we would be satisfied enough with looking for companies that can solve a problem. Um, we know if they solve that problem, eventually they will sell. We know the whole market. We know all the networks. We can help them to sell to these networks. Um, and so if we think that the solution will be good, then we think that then we would invest. We don't need to see sales.
I guess that's why people like you exist. And then if you win big, you win big. And maybe I don't have a high enough risk tolerance yet to be a venture capital myself. But that's also why I probably wouldn't be getting a 20x ROI either. That's why certain companies get 20x ROIs because they're investing at an earlier stage. And you've seen the venture capital marketplace change a lot in the last 2 years with regards to funds. What do you see on the horizon now? Is it getting worse? Is it staying steady? Is it starting to improve? What do you think is going to happen in the next 6 months?
Well, it seems that there was still some investment in early stage, and now it seems that it started to change. And well, that's what I read because I haven't seen the change yet. But it seems that later stages will start to get funded again. Um, but right now, at the stage that we are, it's still difficult to get funding, and so this change hasn't occurred yet.
What are you doing to your strategy? Are you just kind of hoping the market changes? Are you approaching new people, going to new, different geographic markets? Maybe if you were looking at VCs in London or New York or Silicon Valley, now you're looking more at Singapore or New Delhi. I don't know, but how has your strategy changed?
Well, yes. So we, because I was living in Europe, we focus mostly on raising funds in Europe, and it's much more difficult even to raise funds in Europe than in the US. So we are opening a chapter in the US to facilitate more funding from the US. I know that the US it's easy right now, but we hope to get a wider network of potential investors.
Well, you've given us a very honest look at uh, the venture capital landscape in the fertility space, at what it's like to incubate companies in that stage, the need in the marketplace that they're filling. How would you like to conclude with our audience?
Um, yes, I think that most of the innovation in this field is going to happen in startups. Basically, there is little funding from government to invest in fertility and reproductive medicine. And now with traditionally most of the innovation happen in the clinics itself. So lots of maverick doctors innovating, scientists. But now with the consolidation in all these networks, all these PE-funded networks, I think that one of the first things that it will go will be research and development in these networks. So really, all the innovation is going to happen probably in these startups.
Dr. Santiago Munné, thank you so much for coming on the Inside Reproductive Health podcast.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
This episode was brought to you by Mind 360, where psychological evaluations become effortless. As an exclusive offer, all IRH subscribers will receive their first evaluation free. Visit www.mind360.us/IRH to sign up and reserve your spot on our list. Elevate care, reduce wait times. Mind 360 is psychology made simple. This episode was brought to you by Family Inceptions. Join the Family Inceptions surrogate referral list at familyinceptions.com/IRH. Connect with intended parents by using our exclusive surrogacy roadmap and elevate your practice today. Today's advertisers helped make the production and delivery of this episode possible for free to you. But the themes expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Inside Reproductive Health, nor of the advertisers. The advertisers do not have editorial control over the content of this episode, and the guest's appearance is not an endorsement of the advertisers. Thank you for listening to Inside Reproductive Health.